Hi friend, welcome to my channel. My name is Lynn and are you thinking about getting into paper crafting? Whether that's card making, mini albums, notebooks, journals, planners, etc. It can be an expensive hobby and there are so many products on the market, tools, equipment, supply, and such a range of things that you can get for your craft room. It can be a little bit overwhelming and hard to know where to start if you are just starting out on your paper crafting journey. So in this video, my hope is to help you identify what I would consider craft room essentials. So these are the things that I reach for all the time whenever I sit down to craft. There's lots more products out there that I use for sure, but I'm trying to limit this video to just those basic supplies. And I'll actually have two versions of this video. This version will be product recommendations where I don't really take budget or the price tag of these recommendations into account. So if budget isn't an issue for you, this is the video you want to watch. However, if you are on a budget and you're just looking to dip your toe in and you don't quite know yet how much you want to really invest in this hobby, then I'll have a second video that offers more budget-friendly alternatives to the same supplies that I'm recommending in this video, because I think the features and functionality that different equipment offer you will be the same regardless of your budget. You can probably find something that is friendly to your wallet. This video is still probably going to be on the long side, so I'll also bookmark or timestamp this video so that if you're looking for a recommendation on any particular type of equipment, you can just hover over that timeline and skip straight to that section of this video. And of course, if you're looking for more budget-friendly alternatives, I'll link to that in the upper right-hand corner so that you can pop on over to that video if that's more your speed. So without further ado, let's dive in. Okay, so I think a good place to start is a craft mat. I am a big fan of the Glassboard Studio magnetic glass craft mat. It is a really sturdy bit of equipment, and it's about 1/4 of an inch thick of glass. Great, easy cleanup if you're doing messy techniques. It's got your grid lines if you need to line things up, measure things. The lines might be a little bit difficult to work with just depending on your viewing angle. You might feel like something is lined up with the lines, but they aren't. So if you are using the grid lines for that, you do want to be looking directly over top so that you can really see if it lines up with the edge. The entire glass mat is magnetic, so it makes it really great for using tools that and accessories that Glassboard Studio has started to come out with, like the magnetic ruler. These pond magnets come now in different shapes, sizes, and it's really great for things like holding down your stencils. I use this to actually hold down things that I'm gluing. If I, rather than putting, say, an acrylic block or something heavy on top so that it holds it in place while the glue is drying, I just use one of these magnets. So it's really, really great for that. So where can you get one of these mats? Well, Glassboard Studio is the website. I think you can get some of these glass mats on Amazon as well. I've seen them, and I've seen some of the accessories on Amazon as well. But one of the nice things is that every month they come out with like a special design. And so if you're looking for something a little special, a little bit more fun than the standard, you can get their limited edition designs. And every month, as I mentioned, a new one comes out. And there's lots of accessories, and it's really nice that Glassboard Studio is coming out with more and more accessories to go with their craft mat. The main product, though, is you'll be able to find it here, the magnetic glass craft mat. And it comes in various different sizes, as you can see down here. The one that I have is True White. I have this mainly because of the fact that I do video, and so I find that the white is probably less glare than something like the black, and it also has the effect of looking like a little bit neater, a little bit cleaner of a work surface, which I also like for my videos. And the size that I use is the 18 by 24, but you can see that there are smaller ones, 9 by 12, up to 36 inches by 48 inches. So that's 3 feet by 4 feet. Of course, the larger of a mat, the more high price the price tag is. So my recommendation is to get the largest one that you feel like you need, because this is something that you only really need to buy the one time. And if you caught my product review video, I won't go through everything again. You can just catch that video if you want to see all of the other things I've tried before I ultimately was introduced to the Glassboard Studio craft mat. Now, I'll be honest, I was actually sent the one that I have for free by Glassboard Studio, and really that's the only reason why I have it, because I've always thought that this was a bit of a high ticket item that I just, until I had it in my hands and was crafting with it, I didn't really see the need for spending that much money on it, to be honest. But I have to say, now that I have it, I wish I just started here. I wish I had just gotten this to begin with, because I've actually purchased so many more, so many different alternatives, so many different products to achieve all the same things that you can achieve with just this. And I think long run, I've probably purchased more craft mats, totaling more than the price of this specific one at this time. And so it would have just been cheaper just to start here with this one. So this is definitely one of those high price tag items that I think is well worth it, and might even be worth it if you're starting out. But you can check out my other video if you are interested to see what I started using when I first started crafting and sharing my videos and my content, because my needs might be a little bit different to yours. Whether or not this is worth it of an investment for you, only you can decide that. But I really love this, and ever since it entered my craft room, it has not budged. It's basically a permanent fixture, and if I ever need to move craft rooms, this is definitely coming with me. So that is probably the first craft essential item I would recommend. Probably the thing that I use the most every time I sit down to craft is some form of paper trimmer, guillotine, something to cut paper and give me a nice clean edge. If you're part of my community, you know that I have a lot of paper trimmers. And if you told me that I could only pick one to recommend, it would be this one. This is the We Are Memory Keepers all-in-one tool. And whether you are starting out or you're well into your paper crafting journey, this is something that I highly recommend, because it has so many built-in features and functionality to it. Some things it does better than others, but it's really nice for the two things that I use it for, and that is to score and to cut. So I love multi-purpose tools because it's compact. If you don't have a lot of space in your craft room, it's really nice that you can get a lot of functionality and not have a lot of specialty equipment, and everything's sort of right at arm's reach. So scoring and cutting is something that I do a lot of in card making, in mini albums, and so it's convenient that you can do both really easily on the all-in-one tool. So it does have an arm that you can use to expand and measure out to 14 inches. So that's kind of nice. And basically the way this works is that you have this panel here, and if you lift this out, you can flip it. And what that does is that it will actually change this from allowing you to cut inside where that track is, where the teal and the cream color meet up, or when you flip it over, you have this lip or this raised edge where you can butt your paper against and then do your scoring. So one of the things I had to get used to was scoring from the right side, because normally on my old scoreboards, 0 started over here, and you would butt up against some edge on this side and measure from 0 outwards. This one, you butt up on the right, and then you measure from the right to left. A little bit different. It takes a little bit getting used to and adjusting to, but once you get used to that, it's really no different from any other score tool. It's just nice that you can flip back and forth between cutting and scoring. So let's say you want to just trim off 1/4 of an inch. So you can either measure your full panel here and then line your left edge so that what you have on this side is exactly what you want. So if I want a 6-inch wide panel, I can just line this up at 6 inches and then cut. But if I just want to take, say, 1/8 of an inch off or 1/4 of an inch off, there's actually measurements on this teal piece as well. It's hard to see, but there are grooves. It's engraved in. And so you can see, you can use this. It goes out to 1 3/8 of an inch. So that's kind of nice if you just want to cut strips. Let's say you want to cut 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch strips to do maybe some paper piecing, then you can do that. And the trimmer itself is a V-blade trimmer. And so you would just line this up wherever you want and just slice off whatever you need. And the thing with a V-blade trimmer is that it looks like this. So it's called V-blade because you can see the V shape there. And one of the things that you want to take note of with any sort of blade like this, and there's lots of different paper trimmers that have this a very similar style of cutting blade, but essentially what you want is you want to use this V, that blade on both edges. So you want to ultimately slice off your paper. You want to trim with a downward motion, and that uses this side of your blade, and you want to slice with an upward motion so that you use this side of the blade. I'm not going to touch the blade, but that way for each of these blade trimmers, you can actually sort of make it last a little bit longer by using both sides. And that way you don't have to replace this as often as you might if you're always and only cutting downward. This is a consumable piece. You do need to replace this over time because eventually the blade's going to get dull and you're not going to get nice clean cuts like this anymore. You're going to start to get fuzzies. So that's one thing that with this style or any style of blade trimmer that operates similar to this, you will have to replace this over time. That's to be expected, but it's overall a really nice type of trimmer because it also allows you, let's say I need to make a cut but somewhere in the middle of my panel. So let's say I just need to be 1 inch in from the right, and if I need to cut a 1 inch slit starting at the 2 inch mark going down to the 3 inch mark, I can just drop this in. There's actually a groove or a line on the trimmer on the blade itself, so I know exactly where the blade will start to cut, so I can line that up at the 2-inch. And then drop that into the middle of my project and just slice. And again, I can see the line here, and I can just go as far as I need. And so that lets me cut a little slit right in the middle of my panel. Can't really do that with a guillotine because a guillotine always slices from one end from the top down all the time, every time. So in terms of versatility, having a trimmer like this where you can drop your blade in wherever you want, sometimes there's like really fun, cool fun fold cards where you would need to make slits like that in the middle of a panel. And so this will let you do that. So besides those two functionalities, which are the two things that I would use this the most for, there are things that you can use this for that I think are really helpful and nice to have as a beginning paper crafter before you start getting into more specialized tools. So the first is, there's this. This is a kind of like a little accessory that helps you to create envelopes, banners, tags, and tabs. So here you have, if you're familiar with seeing any type of envelope maker, and there are specialty tools by We Are Memory Keepers themselves, and this chart will show you how to, whatever size envelope you're trying to make, or whatever size card you want to create a custom envelope for, it tells you what size paper you need to cut. So you can cut that on this. And then it tells you what number to line up against this tool in order to create a custom envelope for it. So you can watch tutorials on how to use this, but basically you just set this into your scoreboard there. And then when you have your paper cut down to size, you would actually line it up against this ruler here, which has a lip. And this measurement guide is what this chart tells you. So you would just line it up wherever it tells you to, and then you would score. And this scores you the diagonal lines that will enable you to create that envelope fold. And if you're familiar at all with envelope making, the other thing that an envelope, say like an envelope punch board, for example, the other thing that does for you is it actually punches out where those folds of your envelope overlap in the corners. This also has a punch that allows you to remove some of that excess cardstock. So for example, if you have something like this, normally you would have your two score lines like that, and what you're looking to get rid of, like you'll have two crossing score lines like that, kind of. And this punch will actually remove some of that excess cardstock. So if I punch this, you can see that's what you get. And normally if you had scored this already, you would have a score line here and a score line there. That way when you fold this over, it doesn't have all that bulk right there. And these will fold over and sit relatively flatly and just not have a lot of excess paper in that corner. So that's really cool. You also have other functionality like being able to punch the hole for your tags. So let's say you've made a tag, you can punch the hole at the top of your tag. This lets you punch rounded corners for your tabs. So there's lots of functionality built into this. One of the things that is built in, but that I don't use this for, is it does come with a stamp platform. These right here are springs with magnets. And the idea is that this actually comes with a sort of like a plastic plate that is magnetized so that it attaches here, and it's spring loaded so that you can put the plate which has your stamp on it and then put your bit of cardstock here and press into it. Now this platform, it is magnetized, so if you can hear that, that's the board itself magnetized, not the magnetization of my glass board. So you can see this pond magnet is stuck to it. So this is magnetized in this upper section here where your stamp platform can reach, because it can't reach all the way down to the bottom. So the reason why I don't use this for stamping though is because you're stamping onto like a plastic ridged surface. And so I have found that it doesn't always yield the best results with stamping. And this style of stamping where it's either like a peg system or these magnetic springs, there's a little bit of wiggle room, a little bit of play. So if you're trying to stamp in the same position time and time again consistently, so let's say you stamp an image and it doesn't stamp completely, you might need to stamp again, but you want to make sure that you're stamping exactly in the same spot so that you don't get any ghosting or double lines. So I have found that this isn't the most reliable for that. Now there's workarounds, and if you're very careful and you're very consciously only going straight up and down and you're never sort of pushing at it an angle or anything, it's possible to do. It's just that it's not my preferred. So let me show you the product listing if you are looking for it in at shops. So I'm going to just bring up scrapbook.com, but the all-in-one tool, it's available in a lot of different places, including Amazon. And this is what it looks like. And I'll show you, this actually has an image of the, see this clear plate here? It is gridded, and that's the stamping platform. So if you don't have anything and you're brand new to crafting, this kind of has it all of your really basic tools and equipment. You can start with this. It is, at the time of this recording, $70, which can be a high ticket item, but for all it does, it, I think, is well worth it. And it's kind of nice, even as an experienced crafter, well into my paper crafting journey. This is still my preferred scoring tool, and I do use it to cut most of the time, but I do have other alternatives that I prefer. But like I said, if I can only pick the one, this is the one that I would choose. And it's really nice if you want to dabble in some other things like making tags and being able to punch holes, like making your own custom envelopes, stamping. It has those features built in. Whether or not those are the best at what they do, that's kind of up to you to make that judgment call. But if those are things that you don't do super often, then it's nice to just use them, have a tool that you can do that with every once in a while, rather than buy a whole other specialty product just for the couple of few occasions when you find yourself wanting to make a custom envelope to match a card, for example. So it is really nice that that those come sort of all included. If you think about buying like a separate cutting tool like a guillotine, a separate scoreboard, a separate envelope maker, a separate hole puncher, a separate X, Y, and Z thing, not only does it take up a lot of room in your craft room, but it probably will add up to more than the price tag of this product. And I, as I mentioned, have been crafting for a while, and this is still my go-to. If you watch any of my videos, you know I probably bring this out almost every video that I film. So highly recommend this. Very, very widely available in a lot of different stores online and in brick and mortar shops as well. So highly recommend the We Are Makers all-in-one tool. The next thing that you probably see me using a lot in my videos is the Scotch Advanced Tape Glider, or ATG for short. And this is basically my go-to now for applying double-sided dry adhesive tape. I used to buy them, well, I guess I should say I still have it, but I don't purchase quite as much anymore tape rolls like this, because if you craft a lot, what you might find is that this is so much faster, because you just depress this trigger and then you can just swipe down wherever you want to lay down a line of tape. It's really, really easy to do. And one of the things that you don't have to struggle with if you were to use something like this, tape on a roll, is you don't have to struggle with removing the paper liner, because to use this, you would basically just find where it starts, which sometimes is also a struggle. So it starts here. And so you would lay down a strip wherever you need it, tear it. It tears pretty easily, so that's not as much of an issue. But then when you put this down, then in order to stick something on top of it, you do need to remove that paper liner. And sometimes that can be hard to do, sometimes not so much. But if you want to craft, you do a lot of crafting, maybe you make a lot of cards en masse, then speed becomes a thing, especially if you sell your crafts. The more quickly you can create something that you're selling and still be able to produce it at volume and at high quality, the more you're going to be able to sell, and the more profitable that product ends up being. The downside of this is that because there isn't a liner that you have to remove, as soon as something starts to come off of the roll here, it starts to be exposed to air, to dust, and all of that. So here, this is exposed stickiness. So I've just touched it a bunch, which means now that is less tacky and is going to be less strong when I go to use it. And if you don't craft often and you leave this exposed to air like this, that could eventually just dry out and not be sticky at all. It can be a dust magnet, so it might start to collect dust and then also end up being not sticky over time. If you're crafting a lot and you're using this a lot, then you probably don't have to worry too much about that, because you're going through it and it's just not sitting there for days and weeks on end. If you're not frequently crafting, then maybe this doesn't make quite as much sense, because it's really meant for efficiency. If you're finding yourself using a lot of your tape runner, this makes it really easy, fast to apply. And I like it a lot, especially since I do a lot of sketch cards and I like to layer up a lot of things, and so it can help with all of those various layers, mats and layers and whatnot. So that's a bit of equipment or tool that I find pretty essential, mostly because I do craft a lot. And so having some efficiencies, having something that's just makes my life easier, to me, is worth it. And this particular glider, it can be hard to find, but if you are looking for it, like I originally bought it on Amazon, which I can't seem to find anymore, but it is available here on at Michael's. And at the moment, this is the price on it. But there's always coupon codes and whatnot at Michael's, Joann's, etc. So you might be able to get a coupon and actually get this at less than the listed price here. But this is the pink version. There's a yellow version that I think dispenses 1/2 inch or 3/4 inch wide tape, whereas this one is very specifically 1/4 inch. And so if you're having trouble finding this one, then you can always look for the yellow version as opposed to the pink version. And there's also an adapter that you can get so that you can load 1/2 inch rolls of tape, because you do need these tape refills. And so you can get an adapter, and that way your yellow tape glider can do quarter, half, or 3/4 of an inch. So depending on the type of crafting that you do, whether you need a wider roll of tape, like for mini albums, sometimes it's nicer to have the wider roll because you're working on, most of the time, a larger canvas. It can be nice to have that, but otherwise I find the 1/4 inch really just fine. So that's one type of glue dispenser that I have found to be invaluable. Next is this one, which I would never have really believed to be a craft room essential, but now that I have it, I truly do love it, because I do feel like it is just ergonomically a little bit friendlier on my hands. And as well, it is actually it's actually kind of nice that you can always keep your glue bottle with the tip down so that you have this ready to go. And I know that some folks are bugged by maybe a little bit of glue drying at the tip. I'm not really super bothered by that. I just kind of pick it off, and I try to pull it off so that if there's any glue that's dried inside the tip, that it pulls it out as well. And you can kind of see, I just pulled out that little bit of dry glue, and it's flowing just fine. So I'm not precious with how I use this either. And I'm like that for a reason, because I really, if I'm going to recommend a product, I want to use a product that I don't have to think about how I'm using that product in order to successfully use it. So I don't want to have to be precious about how I'm putting this back in the cradle, whether or not it's in the cradle versus whether I put the cap back on. It's not so much that I'm like lazy and I don't want to do all of those things, but I know that I'm also very forgetful, and I'm not always guaranteed to, remember to put the cap on. And really, if a product can function without me having to be super mindful, super cognizant of actually how I use it, then that's better, because it's not getting in the way of my crafting. And that's how I like my tools. I like my tools to actually help me craft, and I don't want my tools themselves to be work. And so that's one of the things I really like about this, because I am not precious about how I set this into the holder. I've used it for over a year, and I've never put the cap back on. And I don't craft every day. So there are days where this is just sitting in the holder just like this for 24 hours, 48 hours, sometimes even longer than that. Sometimes I go 3 or 4 days without crafting. It happens. And I don't put the cap back on. So I just leave it just like this. And sometimes, as you saw a moment ago, it might have like a little bit of dried adhesive, but I just always pick at it so that I'm pulling the adhesive out like this. That way, if there is a little bit of dried adhesive inside the tip that could create a clog, if you pull it out this way, it's more likely that you are able to dislodge that clog. Versus if you pull sideways, then you might, be able to pull off whatever little glue booger is on the outside, but you might be left with a little bit of dried adhesive on the inside of the tip, which creates a clog. But otherwise, really I haven't had much of an issue besides that. So I really like it. I know that it's pretty popular, and so can be kind of hard to find. It's often out of stock. But at the time that I'm recording this, you can actually find it. It looks like it's in stock at scrapbook.com. So that's the price tag on it. Kind of expensive for a glue dispenser. granted. So maybe not for everybody, but I'll be honest, I've used a lot of other things like little little bottles like this, and I've decanted larger bottles of glue into these small little bottles, and they work just fine. It's just a little bit harder on your hands, and that's really it, because pinching like this can create some fatigue if you craft a lot, versus this where you can use like basically your whole hand as a grip, as opposed to the finer motor skills of just using a couple fingers to press this. Also, sometimes the plastic glue bottles, some are like a harder plastic and some are a softer plastic, making them easier or harder to actually dispense the glue. With this, you kind of have the benefit of this trigger, which has if you look at it, what it's doing is it's lifting that bit of pink plastic, and so that's what's pushing up against this to dispense it. And so you're able to actually apply more force. So even if the glue bottle is a little bit of a stiffer plastic, this has been designed to work specifically with this glue bottle so that it's easier on your hands. And then you can just refill the glue bottle with whatever your favorite glue is. It does come with a bottle of glue. So it does come with the Nouveau Deluxe Adhesive, a 2-ounce bottle. And then it also comes with a second 2-ounce bottle that's empty. And that way you can use whichever one you want. There's 2 different glue tips as well, so that if you're looking for like a more fine tip nozzle, then you have that. And then the second one is a little bit larger. So if you want a little bit more glue to come out, and then you can use that as an alternative. So those are the 2 that I use for dry adhesive tape, regular liquid adhesive. Right now I have this filled with my Barely Art glue. And the third type of glue that I use a lot of, if you watch my channel, is 3D Kalau glue. And I have found this. This is an Amazon purchase. It's not too spendy. This is relatively recent to my craft room. And I have a first look video on this, but I also, I actually have a first look video on my glue press too. But one of the things that I haven't yet tested with this is how easy or hard will it be to refill this and use this same kind of syringe at this, once this is done. So that remains to be seen, but at the moment, this is also a craft essential in my craft room, because I do use the 3D glue gel a lot. And what I used to use to dispense it is these syringes. And to be honest, it's a little bit awkward to dispense glue this way, like to try to get this wherever it needs to go. The glue would come out here, or you sometimes see me in older videos dispense this way, and push down like this. Either way, it's kind of awkward. and again, more stress, more strain on my hands. So I am getting older by the day, and so if I want to continue crafting and crafting comfortably and not have it create muscle fatigue, repetitive stress injuries, these types of tools I feel will help prevent some of those issues. And if you're already having issues with dexterity, with muscle and joints like arthritis and whatnot, maybe these will help you as well. This operates very similar to the glue press, where it's on this sort of like a full hand grip motion to dispense, and it dispenses really effortlessly. a lot more effortless than this little syringe. And the tip is about the same size tip in terms of how much it dispenses at a time. So they're roughly the same size. So this syringe looks huge, but the tip is about the same size. And in particular, one of the reasons why I know it's the same size is that this cap is the only downside. The only downside to this so far is it didn't come with a cap. I had to zoink the cap off of one of these syringes, and thankfully, these are standard sizes. And what's nice is this is threaded. And so I used to occasionally would get some of the 3D glue gel would harden, and I'd have to pull out like a little bit of dried adhesive, a little bit of dried glue, in order for this to start dispensing again. But this cap, and that's even with this cap in, the exact same cap. But this cap, because it's screwed in, it's threaded in, I think it seals it a little bit better. And so I haven't had that issue with this sort of glue gun per se. And so far this is working out well. Now, would you put like a PVA glue, like a Barely Art glue in here? Well, I would not, because I might try it if somebody was really curious, but I'm not going to fill up the whole thing. And the reason why is because this tip is big. It is not a fine tip needle. You might be able to, and I can look into this, but it is possible to get like fine tip needles like this to dispense out your adhesive. And if that's a standard tip, maybe it's possible to fit one of these tips onto that end. And so who knows, I might be able to find something that would work. So it would be an adjustment like this. So I still have to play around with that idea a little bit. This is I have to work through that first, and then I'll see what I have in my craft room to test the idea of, putting another type of tip onto there that's more of a fine tip. And we'll see if that works. It might, we'll see. But it's definitely something worth experimenting with, because if you like the idea of having this style of glue dispenser where it's more of a grip that you can sort of use your full hand to dispense, then it's a more affordable option to the glue press. So it's still a craft room essential for what I use it for, which is my 3D glue, but I will test it over time to see if maybe there's an option to also use it for something like a PVA glue, like your Barely Art, or my favorite glue, which is the Lenco pH Neutral. So these are sort of my glue dispensing tools that I like to use, that I definitely would recommend. I love to die cut. So definitely a craft room essential for me is a die cutting machine. And when it comes to die cutting machines, you have a lot of different options, in the sense of there's electronic die cutting machines and there's manual die cutting machines. And then when you make that decision, there's a lot of different brand and styles of die cutting machines, even within that bracket, within each of those brackets. So if you are going to do a lot of die cutting, I would recommend just jumping into an electronic die cutting machine. The reason is because long term, it's going to be faster for you, and it's going to be friendlier on your body, so you don't have any repetitive stress motions of having to manually crank the die cutting machine to roll the plates through. So if you think that you're going to be, let's say, making to sell, if you're crafting or creating at any sort of volume, like mass producing anything, if you just are casual crafter but you just like to die cut, you might feel like over time you're going to upgrade to an electronic machine, and so why not just start there if your budget isn't a factor? So I love this is my workhorse die cutting machine. It's the Anna Griffin Empress Mini, and it is really spectacular. Even though this has a small footprint, I highly recommend this over other mini small die cutting machines because firstly, it's electronic, so it's nice. It's going to have all of that benefit of saving your body some wear and tear and some efficiency. So once you get the plate started, you have a couple, a second or two to maybe do something else, clean something up before your plates are out the other end, and then you can pick it up and resume what you were wanting to do. But the main reason why I like it is because this opening will fit an A2 card. So that's an A2 card base. You can see it fits through with room to spare. There's some room there. So comfortably will fit through. And what does that mean? Why is that important? Well, most mini die cutting machines are maybe 2.5 to 3.5 inch wide plates. Well, these plates are 4.25. So you can fit the entire 4.25 panel on the cutting plates. And what that means is that you can cut something like an A2 cover die using this mini machine. And if you are like me and you make mostly A2 size cards, having a die cutting machine that can accept A2 cover dies and cut through them no problem means that pretty much most every die I need for card making I can cut and pass through the Mini Empress or Empress Mini. So I find these days, ever since I got this, which I think has been over a year now, I primarily use this as my die cutting machine. It's fast, the plates are short, so if you're needing to die cut a couple few things, it passes through no time at all, and it's kind of hands-free. So once it starts going through, the electronic rollers will just continue to pull it through until it's out the other end. I don't have it plugged in right now so that I can show it, but it's really convenient for that, and the fact that the plates are large means that you can really I think it would work for most every die set that I have for card making. Now, if you do like to make mini albums, bags, boxes, etc., a lot of times those dies are larger, and you would need something like a 6-inch machine or an A4 platform machine that can take like the 8 to 9-inch wide plates. And of course, if you are a fan of my Easy Wonder dies, those are 6-inch dies. So you do need a larger die cutting machine for my Easy Wonder dies as well. So there is that. So my recommendation is if you're starting out, then maybe get yourself an electronic die cutting machine. I would recommend this one. And then if you do need to find yourself cutting larger dies, maybe you can get a secondary machine that is perhaps a manual machine. And that way, on the rare occasion when you need to use a larger die, or the other consideration you really want to think about is, do you need to hot foil or better press? Because if you do, those require some specialty equipment, which I won't cover here in this video, but they do require a die cutting machine to apply pressure for to achieve the end result. So if you do think that you might get into hot foiling and you might get something like the Glimmer, or you think you might get into letter pressing and you might get something like the Better Press, then you're going to need a die cutting machine that's compatible with those systems. So just check those systems and see what the machine compatibility is and what die cutting machines will work with them. Because you might find that you want to stick with Spellbinders and their Platinum machine because they make the glimmer and they make the better press. And so it's going to naturally be more compatible with their own die cutting machine. So that is something to take into consideration. Like, what else are you going to need your die cutting machine for beyond just die cutting, embossing, etc.? So I find that, to be honest, I would still always recommend having this because it's such a workhorse and it does like 80 to 90% of what my die cutting needs are. And it's so convenient and handy to put in my craft space. I would still always recommend this, and then maybe having a secondary machine that, if it's not an electronic machine, then that's maybe not as big of an issue, because the mini Empress will do most of your die cutting, and you can use that secondary machine to do your, everything else. So the other machine that I would recommend, besides, it's a little bit big to fit on camera, but just so that you get an idea for the price, this is the mini Empress. And I'm showing it to you on scrapbook.com. It's currently out of stock, but you can see the price of this machine. And as well, I don't have it personally, so I can't vouch for it. But if it's anything like the Mini, the Empress Elite is larger, and it has the 8-inch wide opening so that you can use your larger dies, like your mini album dies and things like that. And so if you're looking for just one machine that is going to sort of do it all, maybe this is an option, and you can just skip having the small one because this will work just fine for everything, small and large. You might have to double check with the Glimmer and the Better Press specs to see if the Anna Griffin Empress machines are compatible with that system, but in terms of the size of the opening, it should be, but it's more a matter of like the opening this way, like the height of the opening, whether it's compatible with the sandwich that the Glimmer and the Better Press have. And then what I have, though, in terms of large platform machines, I can't even find anymore on scrapbook.com. I have the original Gemini in the A4 size, so it's the larger 9-inch wide opening. These days, there's a Gemini 2. I don't know what all the differences are, to be honest, because I don't have it, and I'm not really in the market for another electronic die cutting machine, so I really haven't stayed up to date with the latest and greatest models. And so definitely might be something that you want to research if you're on the market. But basically, the Gemini 2 should be very similar in functionalities, just like an upgrade, I would presume. And it has the 9-inch wide plates that even if you don't use large dies, if you do a lot of die cutting, you can pile a lot of dies onto a 9-inch by what's the other dimension? A 9 by 12.25-inch plate, and just get all of your die cutting done for one project. So it is convenient and handy for that. And so that's another option with this price tag. And in my craft room, I have, like I mentioned, the original Gemini. That's kind of always out and ready for me to use. My mini Empress is out and ready for me to use. And I have my manual die cutting machine for when I need to just pull that out to do some hot foiling or some better pressing. And I'll cover that in my second video, which is more budget-friendly options for all of these things. And so a more budget-friendly option for die cutting is to look at a line of manual die cutting machines. Now, if you like the idea of having an electronic machine and you still want to have compatibility with glimmering and better pressing, I do think, but don't take my word for it because I don't actually have the machine, but I think the Sizzix switch I've heard crafty friends tell me that that is compatible with those systems. But definitely check the Spellbinders website. They'll have a guide where you can see what all machines are compatible with their systems. So die cutting machines, lots of different options out there. If you're gonna be heavy into the die cutting, I definitely recommend some form of an electronic die cutting machine. And it's a bit of an investment, but I would definitely get the largest size that you think you'll need so that you can just buy this the one time and have that be your investment in die cutting machines and not continually upgrade to get a larger and larger model, or continue to upgrade from a manual then to an electronic and so on and so forth. So, you know, in my craft room, I have found it useful to have the mini version of the Empress and to still have a larger version. So that might be a little bit overkill for your craft room, but I definitely find this little one a workhorse and very, very convenient because of its small footprint and the fact that it can handle, like I said, about 90, if not more, percent of my die cutting needs. So this really does the job for me. But once you get into glimmering and all of that, then there's other considerations and other sizes that you would need to scale up to. So that's die cutting and the products that I use and highly recommend. So if we're talking die cutting machines, then we also need to talk dies. I would definitely recommend, if you're getting into crafting, some nested shape dies because they're great value for money. And as well, I find that they're really, really useful for adding layers and adding interest to your projects, whether it's cards, albums, etc. And what's great is that because they are nested, you can create mats and layers to kind of layer up, but you can also create frames, shaker windows, things like that. So they help you to create some really fun different types of cards as well. Lots of different brands on the market. Basically any company that has dies probably has their own version of nested shape dies. These top ones are Spellbinders, and I think that if you make A2 size cards, it's really nice to have an A2 rectangle die set so that you have mats and layers that have that same aspect ratio of the 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 size of an A2 size card. Waffle Flower does A7, and I also have A2. They probably do a lot of others as well, but look at how many dies you get in this set. It's a lot. I don't know if Waffle Flower still packages their dies this way, but these are on, they came with magnetic sheets. So really nice for storage as well. If I had to pick one to recommend though, my absolute favorite set of nested shape dies is from Craft Stash with their brand of creative craft products, because they have what they call super size nested shape dies. Look how big these are. They come in all sorts of different shapes, sizes, and so what's great is, say for example, you can take your oval dies, plain oval edge. Look at how many different sizes you have. Now, okay, the reality is, are you ever really going to need like that big? It's probably like 8 inches, I think, is the diameter of some of these supersized dies. You might never use an 8-inch oval die, and you might never use the really small one, but given the range and the possibilities, and when you see me flip over to where to shop for this, it's great value for money. And then you have the options, because if you're starting out with A2 size cards, maybe you might occasionally find yourself wanting to make a 5x7 or a 6x6. Maybe you want to make an album. Maybe you want to make whatever have you home decor item. And you might find yourself in need of something a little bit larger than what you would typically use on a smaller scale project. And these nested shape dies will have you covered. But not only that, they have continued to come out with more and more of unique shapes, I would say. But one of the nice things, and in particular with ovals, because ovals, rectangles have like a specific aspect ratio of the width as compared to the height, not every oval is the same. Whereas circles, for example, are all 1-to-1, square are all 1-to-1. So every square nested die set is more or less going to be the same. You might not have the exact same increments, but in terms of the shape, it's pretty much the same. Ovals, though, if you are investing in a particular system or brand, one brand's oval nested shape dies might be a little skinnier and taller versus another brand which might be more squat and more wide. So just be aware that there's going to be some differences. But what I really like about this particular brand is that you have your ovals, and then they've come out with like really fun, interesting, different shaped borders. So this is an inverted scallop border, but you can kind of nest these because they're the exact same ratio. So if you take one of these, it will layer on top of this with an even border all the way around. So this is the inverted scallop. Here's the scalloped edge. And then this is like an even crazier, like wavy edge die set. When these go on sale, I'm going to show you the price, and it's going to be a little bit unbelievable that at regular price, they are already a great bargain, but often, several times throughout the year, you'll find these go on sale for something like 30% off, 40% off. I've seen them up to 50% off. I haven't used this die set yet, but when it dropped to like, I think 40 or 50% off, I bought it anyways because I'm kind of bought into this system, and I like having all of these options. So when I'm in a wacky mood and I want to do something like a little bit different and fun, maybe I'll pull this out. It's kind of cool. So so that's what I really like about the creative craft products. Now let me show you, as promised, the where you can find this if you are shopping. So on the Craft Stash website. Now Craft Stash does ship out of the UK, so there's a little bit of time between when you order, if you are US based like I am, and when you actually get products on your doorstep, so you don't have that instant gratification. And as well, you might have to pay shipping if you cannot meet the minimum threshold to qualify for free shipping. I find it kind of easy to meet that minimum threshold, so I've never really had to pay shipping, but that might not be the case for you. So those are considerations that you might want to factor in if you want to shop at Craft Stash. But look at all of these variety of different nested shape dies. Here's the circle one. You have a set of 24 dies for $24. This set of hexagons is 21 dies for $17. My guess is that it's just as much metal. It's nearly the same number of dies, but circles are more popular, so they're gonna put a little bit of a heavier, like a higher price tag on it, where hexagons, they probably aren't used all that often, and maybe that's why the price point is a little bit lower. So they're pricing it to meet the demand and the need for these different shapes. But if you look at them, here's some rectangles, and if you see rectangles, these probably will coordinate, so you can layer one on top of the other. And here's a set of 8 for $11. Now, you see these prices. Now think about what I said earlier, that they often go on sale for 40% off, 50% off. So can you imagine paying single dollars, for a nested shape die? Because at 50% off, this becomes, $5.50, $6, right? Really incredible bargain. Like I said, even priced at full price, but then knowing that you can catch a sale, they become even greater value for money. There's lots of new shapes that I haven't yet explored. So there's these fun little sort of label shapes that are a little bit more ornate and different, and different ways to do kind of notches and whatnot. So there's a lot that they continue to introduce, and still there's lots of very basic shapes. Now, you might be seeing, okay, here's stars, here's some more stars, what's the difference? You do want to make sure that you're reading the descriptions and looking at the product listings themselves in more detail, because this set, there's 8. It's not their supersized line, and it's 10 something, which is still pretty reasonable price, just over $1 each. But if you look here, the nested shapes each have kind of a different stitch border detailing or border detailing. So there's stitch detailing on some of the dies, and then there's like just like dotted pierce detailing on every other die. So this is a circle die set, and it cuts a plain edge border, but inside the edge there's some extra little details, which to be honest, like that's what you want in your dies, is to be able to have some of these nice little details that you wouldn't be able to do by hand. So if I were to recommend some nested shape dies for you, I would recommend the ones from Creative Craft Products. As you can see, there's like these ones here with the sort of torn, distressed edge. And I would recommend prioritizing ones that give you a more circular shape, because anything with a straight edge, to be honest, you can cut yourself. So your rectangles, your squares, if you have a paper trimmer like the all-in-one tool or a guillotine or any kind of paper cutter, even a ruler and a craft knife, you can cut your own squares and rectangles. They don't have that really nice professional cut edge that a die gives you. And maybe you're not super precise every time you go to cut that same size panel, whereas a die is going to give you very precise, repeatable cuts every time. But if you're looking to start your collection of nested shape dies, for my preference, I would start with something that I cannot easily manually hand cut myself. So that would be the circles and the ovals. And then as you want to add more interesting shapes to your collection, that's when I would broaden to other things like an A2 nested die set, for example, so that I can easily like get some mats and layers onto an A2 card. And then whatever your favorite shapes are that you think you're going to use the most often, whether it's hearts or stars or even tags. They have nested tag dies, nested banner dies. Creative Craft Products isn't the only brand that does nested shape dies. So I showed some from Spellbinders. They've been coming out with a lot of different shapes, and so you'll find some really fun, different shapes like this, kind of like an arch. You'll find your basic shapes, of course. You know, these ones have like a notch corner. These have some really fun notches, but not on every all of the 4 corners. Of course, you'll have your basics. So there is like there's a couple of different A2 sets that I have. There's you know, some scalloped cornered ones. This is a tag nested die set. Hearts. So they have all of the shapes as well. Lots of different ovals, oblong ovals, and whatnot. And so lots of different options, and of course your basics as well. And then of course, if you are a fan of scrapbook.com, you'll find nested shape dies from a variety of different brands. So like I mentioned, if there's a company that puts out dies, it's kind of likely that they'll have their own nested shape die and their own sort of twist on it. So Waffle Flower, you saw the two that I have, they have way more than that. Scrapbook.com has their own set as well, and theirs are really affordable. You see the sale price here, but that's kind of like every day it's on sale at that price, I feel. But they have, scalloped edge, fancy edges, they have tags and whatnot as well. So there's lots of different places to shop for your nested shape dies and a lot of different shapes to choose from. So just depending on what you think is will get the most use in your craft room, maybe prioritize getting yourself, a couple sets to start. And then as you craft more and your own sort of the style and aesthetic for how you like to use layers on your projects, then you can expand and use, get some more different shapes. Now, the only reason why I have multiples of what's essentially kind of the same, like this is an A2 set, and that's the second A2 set that Spellbinders has. So why do I have that and as well the Waffle Flower one? Well, when I make my Spellbinders influencer videos, I do like to try to stick to Spellbinders brand products, and that way you can kind of see what all you can get from Spellbinders if you are a fan and you want to stay compatible with all of the things that they offer. So you'll find a lot of times designers like myself who are on design teams, we have multiples of essentially what is the same thing that will achieve the same thing, but by a lot of different brands, so that when we're making our design team projects for that particular company, sometimes it's a requirement and sometimes it's just something we like to do in order to best represent that company. And so that's the only reason why I have multiples of these. I started with this, but I'm not on the Waffle Flower design team, and so you rarely see me actually pull this out on camera to use, although sometimes I do use it. Most of the time these days, I'm using either the Spellbinders ones or the Creative Craft product. Now, I'm not on the Craft Stash design team either. I'm just a super fan of their supersized die sets. So, and that's because similar to these oval ones, I have those same border designs in circles and in rectangles and stuff as well. I have quite a lot of theirs, and I like it for the price, and I like it for the size, and they're good quality dies. They cut nicely every time, so there's nothing not to like about them. So I would definitely recommend some sets of nested shape dies, and whatever you're crafting, whether it's cards or mini albums, these offer great ways to add some different looks and create some fun things like apertures and shakers and whatnot. So I always find these to be a definite craft room essential. Okay, so we've talked about die cutting, now it's on to stamping. So I'll be honest, I am not a great stamper, and so I definitely find a stamp positioning tool to be an essential for me, because I need the ability to stamp more than one time in the exact same location, because I can't always get a perfect impression the first time I stamp. And so that's just me. If you are really good with something like an acrylic block and you can just go stamp and boom, have it look perfect every time, maybe you don't need to invest in a stamp positioning tool. But in my craft room, it's kind of a must-have if I'm gonna do any stamping. A lot of times, if it's just like a small sentiment, I can do that by hand with an acrylic block, a-okay. And so I should maybe also mention acrylic blocks because they are a craft room essential for me. So it is worth it to also mention them. But in terms of big ticket items, the positioning tool, I feel, is the thing that I use and would definitely recommend. Now, there's a lot of different stamp positioning tools on the market. When I started out in my crafty journey, I found this one on Amazon, and it's a really nice, it was at the time a really nice price point. I can't find it anymore at that price point. It's, as with a lot of things, it's gone up in price, but it's gone up in price kind of astronomically. When I got mine, it was like a long time ago, definitely over 5 years, maybe longer. And what I like about it is that it's on a hinge door system, very familiar to some other popular stamping platforms like the Misty, which I don't have. I've never had, and I've never really felt the need to get one because it's always been sort of outside of my budget. And it might be one of those things like the glue press that once I have it, I'm gonna wonder, why did I just not get this to start with? But I don't have that experience to share with you. I just have this, and I've tried other things like the Crafter's Companion stamping platform. I don't like their system. I've tried the We Are Memory Keepers system with the pegs. I don't really like their system because it's got a little bit of play, it's got a little bit of wiggle room, where if you really think about what you're doing and you're very intentional with your motions, you can definitely just go straight up and down and get a consistent stamping in the same spot time and time again. But I feel like if you're a little bit off, it's possible to have like a little bit of wiggle room, a little bit of play, and your stamping would be off. And it is not, from my experience, I never really have to think about that or worry about that with this style of stamp positioning tool where you have a door on a hinge, and I've just never had to worry about it. So this exact model is from Basin Creative, and it's their Stamp Easy. When I got it years and years ago, it was maybe $15-18, and I'll show you what it's selling for these days on Amazon. This is it right here. I believe it looks a little bit different. But it's the same brand, it's the same like name, it's the same size and everything. I put blue tape on mine for a reason, but it's essentially identical so far as I can tell. But look at that price. That's wild. You could get the popular Misty for less than that. So I don't know if these days this is the budget friendly option anymore, because it was when I picked up mine very budget friendly. And be aware that they do have this version on the market as well. This is this is sort of on the peg system, and it's a little bit like the all-in-one tool where it's got those springs and little sort of magnetic clips that you can kind of clip or position them onto. Like I said, I find that those systems are a little bit imprecise, and so if you're really looking for this as a tool where you can do multiple impressions exactly at the same spot time and time again without really having to think too hard about how you're operating the tool, I have not found those systems, well, for myself, I'll just speak for myself, I'm not very successful at using systems like those. So this is where you've got the spring-loaded pegs, kind of like what I showed in the all-in-one tool, and this door can be removed completely. So that's an option, and of course, as I mentioned, the ever popular Misty is available, and we're over here now on scrapbook.com. So if you are, and there's like different color ones that you can get. But as I mentioned, I've never owned a Misty, so I don't really know how this compares to what I have. I just know that I like what I have. And so it might not be the biggest, highest ticket item in this video, and there are more expensive products out there, but I still recommend what I have because it works great for me. And I've tried other things. I haven't tried everything on the market. My sweet petunia probably does not need me to do a product review, so I don't think they'll ever send me one to try just for the sake of trying it. But I'm not gonna purchase it at $70 just for that, experience of testing it as a comparison. I've done that with other products where I've bought them just to test, but it's usually with products that I don't have like an equivalent of. And so there's been a reason why I bought them, because they still had a place in my craft room. If I were to get the Misty, it would be like literally just to see how it compares, because I'm very happy with what I have. So, so there are other alternatives that I have found that I haven't actually used. And so I'll cover those in the budget-friendly version of this video. But if you're in the market for a stamp positioning tool, it looks like this might be sort of the market value for this size stamp tool. Now, there are other higher ticket different items on the market, like the Altenew stamp wheel is another newer to the market stamping platform tool. Sizzix also has one, their own system, so that might be another interesting one to consider. Again, I can't really speak one way or another about those products because I don't have them, and I haven't felt the need to upgrade what I have. And so that's just, in all honesty, where I'm at with my stamping journey. And if you do a lot of stamping, because I have to also admit I'm more of a die cutting crafter than I am a stamp and color crafter, so I haven't felt the need to really invest in a super big stamping platform like the Altenew one. I don't do a lot of like the wreath building, which the stamp wheel is really good for. So there are things that, because of my style of crafting, I just haven't felt the need to invest in this area of tools. But if you are big into stamping and doing things like wreath building and whatnot, then you might want to look at some of these other alternatives like the stamp wheel. I do have this, the We Are Makers version of this rotating. I have a first look video on the equivalent product of this, but that's a very specialty. I wouldn't consider that like a core staple in my craft room. I very rarely bring that out. But like I said, look at all of the different options that you have here. And this is why sometimes it can be really confusing and really kind of hard to know what's worth it to get and what's not. And really, you're the only one who can make that determination as to what's worth it and where you want to invest your money, just depending on what kind of crafter you are and what you use, will find yourself using a lot. Because if you're going to use something a lot, it is worthwhile to put a little bit of money and into that piece of equipment, so that you're not struggling with your tools and you can just be creative and not have your tools limit you or get in the way of your crafting. This is the other system that I've tried. I think it's this one here. I don't really like this one because I feel like there's some play. So these are the same thing. It has the spring-loaded feet that you position into these little recessed circle areas. And even though there's a lot of them around the stamping area, there's still some wiggle room. It's possible, because I've done it, to stamp, meaning to stamp twice in the exact same spot and being a little bit off the mark. So my preference would be for something like the Misty, or like the what I have, the where did it go? The Vason Creative, where it is on this sort of door system. But like I said, what I have used to be the budget-friendly version, but now it appears not so much. It's about the same price as a Misty, and so these days, if I was just getting into crafting and those were my options, I would probably get the Misty because so many other crafters have it. So you know that if a lot of crafters have it and are using it, then it must be real quality. But I can't vouch for it personally myself because I just don't have that experience. So having some kind of a stamping platform, though, is really nice so that you can get good stamping regardless if you're very good at hand stamping or not. It's helpful for a lot of techniques with repeat stamping. If you make en masse and you're stamping the same image and you just want to stamp it over and over and over and over again, it's really easy to put your stamp onto this door, put your card panel here, and just stamp, ink, put another card in, stamp, and ink. It's a lot faster and more consistently lined up from panel to panel than to try to do it manually with your blocks. But you'll see me use my acrylic blocks a lot. The one that you'll probably see me use the most is this one when I need to tear some tape. I rarely use this for actually stamping. Occasionally you'll find me hand stamping maybe a sentiment. That's about my confidence level with hand stamping, is either when I don't really care if I'm getting a perfect image or not, or when I'm doing sentiments, because smaller stamps are, I feel, you know, a lot easier. Now, this is technically a consumable, but I will mention it just to be fulsome in this video. A good ink pad is definitely a craft room essential. So whatever line of inks you prefer, I definitely would recommend VersaFine Onyx Black because it's great. And more likely than not, you're going to want to add a sentiment onto your card, and probably 80 to 90 or more % of the time, I just stamp my sentiment in black. And the VersaFine Onyx Black is really, really good, even stamping by hand with an acrylic block. So it's really dark. It's a pigment ink, so if you wanted to do some special effects like embossing, you know, to give it that nice little bit of shine, you can do that because the ink is a little bit sticky. It takes a little bit of time to dry, which also means you need to be careful also to give it the time it needs to dry before touching it. But it's versatile in that way that you can do some heat embossing. And I'm not going to cover heat embossing tools because, again, that's like a specialty equipment. I wouldn't say you necessarily need to jump into that straight away if you didn't want to. And so I won't cover those supplies, but this is good if you did want to get into heat embossing. And then besides that, you might want, you know, other lines of inks, because even though inks are kind of a consumable in that eventually that ink pad might dry out, it's almost like a tool in the sense that it is going to last a really long time before you need to either replace it or just re-ink it, because most inks have re-inkers that just have like the dye or the pigment, and instead of buying a whole new pad, you just squeeze out some extra ink to replenish this. So the ink pad really doesn't see like a lot of wear and tear and is probably just fine, even if your ink does eventually dry up over time. It just might need a little refresher. And those little ink refills are more, I guess, budget friendly. You get more ink for your money than to buy a full new ink pad. So I would say, just to toss that into the stamping, that some line of inks is another craft room essential, but for sure this one would be my number one if you just need one to start. A really good pigment ink, so VersaFine Onyx Black. Maybe also a really good dye-based ink if you like to color with alcohol markers. And for that, I would recommend a Memento black ink, and I think it's Tuxedo Black is the Memento Black, or a really good hybrid ink. And the Gina K Amalgam ink is really good as a hybrid ink. It's a little bit of a mix between pigment and dye. So for your water-based coloring mediums and for your alcohol-based coloring medium, you can use it on both and not really have to worry about the lines moving for the most part. So that's what I would recommend for stampers out there. That's what works well for me. Like I said, definitely a lot of other products out there, and I'm sure other crafters have other favorites, but these are my favorites for stamping. Okay, those were the big ticket items. Now we're getting into the smaller items that I would still feel are core craft supplies that I use very, very often. So the first are 2 rulers. If you can get the properties of both of these in one, more power to you. I don't think I've ever seen it, and I came across the utility of both of these at different phases in my paper crafting journey, and so that's why I have 2 different ones. But a T-square ruler is really good for when you really want something lined up straight and square. So the way this works is the top of the T, there's a bit of a lip here, so that if, say, this is your card, and you really want straight lines, and you really want, say, your sentiment to be 90 degrees perfectly horizontal on this card, the T-square ruler is great for that, because you can butt up your card against the top of the T, and because this is exactly 90 degrees, you're going to be assured that anything you put on this edge is going to be perfectly horizontal and level. I'm the kind of crafter that most of the time, like, close enough is good enough, and I eyeball a lot of times, but there are occasions where I really want for things to look square and nice and straight. And so I've found that a T-square ruler is really, really helpful for that. So, and there are times when, like, if you're doing kinetic cards, it's actually important for something to be, in perfect alignment. So there's not too many different occasions where that's super important to me, but on the occasions where it is, having this is very handy. Why do I have the steel ruler? Now, the steel ruler I use more often because I use this to cut against. So being that it's steel, if you actually put your cutting blade against it, it gives you a nice straight track to cut against. And because it's metal, if you slip a little bit and your blade goes into the ruler, it's not going to gouge or create nicks in your ruler. And whereas with plastic, if you slip a little bit and it cuts into that, it's not going to be as straight anymore if you're using this to cut a straight line. So so that's definitely something that I use a lot in my craft room. And some form of a craft knife is ideal if you're gonna do hand cuts like this. And so this I find really nice. This is the Fiskars. It's their I think it's like an ergonomic craft knife, but it's basically an X-Acto knife. It's just got this nice form factor of being able to kind of put your finger on it so that you can grip it like this, and you have more control over your cut. So the closer that you can hold something to the tip of the blade, generally speaking, the more control you'll have in operating it. And of course, whatever craft knife you use, keeping your blades nice and sharp and replacing them often will also help with getting nice, good, clean cuts. And the sharper your blade, the safer it is for you because the less force you're having to apply. So imagine if you have to like put down a lot of force, and if you slip while you're putting a lot of force, you're going to slip further or deeper into, cut into something like your finger if you're not careful. And you're gonna have more potential of hurting yourself or cutting or slicing into something that you're not intending to. If your blade is really sharp, it's going to cut through whatever materials more effortlessly so that you're not placing as much force to be able to cut through it. And if you do slip, because sometimes that happens, if you do slip, because you're not exerting a ton of force, hopefully you're not going to cut yourself as badly if it lands or happens that you're cutting into yourself, or you're just not cutting as big of a mistake into your project, and maybe it's easier to cover up. So definitely recommend, if you're going to use a craft knife, change the blade often, keep that blade nice and sharp, and just don't put a lot of force. It's better to like cut, if you can get a good hold on whatever steel ruler that you're using to cut against, taking multiple cuts through it to get through maybe a thicker material is better than applying a lot of force and trying to get it cut in one. Because if this isn't budging, don't worry, you're gonna be able to cut exactly on that line a second time, a third time, however many times it takes to make its way all the way through. Now, if you watch me craft, you know that I actually prefer to use this as my box cutter. So, but I know that scares people. But this is a very, very sharp blade. And not only is it a sharp blade, but it's kind of double-sided. So when that blade is done, I can just flip it over, and then I can use that side, and then I can toss it when it's ready. So when both edges get dull. And so I really like it for that reason, because it's nice and sharp, and for every blade I can actually use both ends of it, and just have to make sure that it's loaded correctly. And this has all the safety features of being retracted, so that you only push the blade out when you go to use it. Otherwise it's housed in here. And so so it is safe to use if you're comfortable with it, but I'm just not gonna the only reason why I'm not recommending this specific thing is because it's not your standard craft tool. It's more, I think you would find it in the hardware section if you were to go shop for it. So a craft knife, whatever your favorite one is. If you do any detail cutting, any fussy cutting at all, I definitely recommend a nice pair of detail cutting scissors. And I've tried a lot over the years, a lot. I should do a separate video on just that, because we never talk about it, but I have a lot of scissors. Probably as many scissors as I have paper trimmers, if I'm honest. And so part of the reason for that is because I'm not a fan of fussy cutting, and so I keep wanting to maybe not be a fan of fussy cutting, but at least not hate doing it. And so I keep trying all the things that people recommend to me, and this one was recommended to me by Amanda Stevens, actually, and so I have loved it ever since I picked it up. It's not made me love fussy cutting, but I'll say that it makes fussy cutting tolerable to where I don't avoid it at all cost like I used to. So it'll be for a separate video. If anyone's interested, just leave a comment, but I can show you what all else I've tried, just so that you have my perspective and my experience when when I tell you that this is my favorite. You'll know what else I've tried when I'm making that statement. And I like it. If you are interested, this is the Spellbinders one. And they do have it in teal, which released after the gray version. Otherwise, I would have gotten the teal version. And they do have it in 2 sizes. So they do have a larger pair of scissors that is great if you're looking for something nice and sharp, and it has the nice like titanium, I think, coating and whatnot. So it is nice for that reason. But I don't have the larger one. I feel like I don't really need the larger one because I rarely use my larger scissors. If I use a larger pair of scissors, more often than not, you probably see me using this, which is like a Dollar Tree. It's Westcott, which is a nice brand, but this is their budget scissors, and I think I got it at the Dollar Tree, like 2 of them for $1. And this is what I use to just like kind of cut up a piece of paper cardstock that I'm gonna die cut into, for example. So it's just to like rough cut things down. So you can use anything inexpensive for that. I don't feel like I need anything too specialty. Even trimming off the edge, if like a little bit of a panel hangs off of my card base, not a big deal to use that pair of scissors to just trim off that little edge. So this though, I find very handy and worth investing a little bit more dollars into, because fussy cutting is really hard to do with large scissors, really hard to do with scissors that aren't sharp enough, and really hard to do with scissors that are not thin enough. So there's a lot of factors that go into making what makes for a really good set of fussy cutting scissors, and this ticks all of those. A bone folder, super critical. I use this all the time, every time, because I burnish everything. I don't only burnish folds that I put into paper, but I burnish anytime I put down any type of adhesive, because your adhesive is going to be, as strong as the quality of that adhesive. That's a factor for sure. But whatever quality of adhesive you're using, and whether it's the dry adhesive tape or liquid adhesive, you're going to get the most out of it if you burnish, for a variety of reasons. And if you've ever seen me make a mini album where I use a lot of different types of adhesive, I always explain why I burnish. And even in simple cards that I don't anticipate anyone keeping forever and ever, I still burnish, because it's a good habit, I feel, to get into, because it helps you to just get the most out of whatever quality products you're buying. So if you're using a dry adhesive, I always burnish that so that it gives it a nice strong stick. If I'm using a liquid adhesive, I always burnish that to really spread that glue out and make sure there aren't, any glue lines and stuff like that. So if you only needed to could only buy one, or if I could only pick one, I would pick this ergonomic one, because it's got the wider edge, comfortable to hold in your hand. It does still have, if you look at it, it's curved on this side, and then it's straight on this. So what I do is, if I'm making like a card base, or I'm just trying to burnish a folded edge, I use the straight side like this, and that gets me a nice crisp fold. If I am burnishing in some adhesive, like this is a nice wide, it's about 2 inches, covers a wide area, and that way I can, let's say I glue down a panel that's nearly this whole card front, just a couple swipes, and I can really burnish all of the adhesive in for that panel, and it's comfortable in the hand. Now, bone folders now really are still called that, but they're most of the time made out of Teflon, and the Teflon material will not leave marks on your cardstock the way that bone folders of the past that were actually made from bone might do. So those actually might mark up your cardstock. And probably a more typical size and shape one is this, which I still find very useful in my craft room, but really only when I'm making things like 3D things like boxes and bags, or sometimes albums, because it's tall. I like to burnish my adhesive as well. I like to stick this in so that I can burnish like the bottom of a bag or the bottom of a box. And so you need something long so that you can stick it inside of the box and still be able to burnish the bottom side. Because it's dimensional, you can't really burnish from the bottom upwards. So there's that. And of course, you know, if you have the classic bone folder made of bone, not everybody likes, I mean, it is actually made of an animal, you know, bone. So not everybody's okay with that. And so you might not see these much anymore, but I've been crafting a long time, so I actually have bone folders that are this size and shape made of bone, and I also have actual bone folders that are the ergonomic size and shape as well. But you just don't see me using those quite as much because this is my favorite. And then every once in a while I'll use this one, which is a pencil bone folder. It's got a more pointed tip to it. It's got the rounded barrel. It's more like a special occasion kind of thing for very specific uses. This might come in handy where some of these other alternatives, not so much. So kind of depends on what you need, but if I could only recommend one, I would say this is probably the one that you see me using probably in every video, honestly. So that's the one that I would definitely consider the core craft supply out of all of my various different options of bone folders. And then if you're gonna do any sort of inking techniques, having some kind of a blending brush is probably another core craft supply. And they come in a lot of different form factors and a lot of different materials. I've tried a lot over the years, from sponge daubers to the little finger versions that, you know, you can just put your finger into and do more precision blending. I've tried oh, these are actually pretty good quality wise. These are the Altenew blending brushes. Great for stenciling, especially small areas and whatnot. But I would say if you do like blended backgrounds, then you might want something larger in terms of the form factor. And there's a couple of different brands that, there's so many different brands really, not just a couple. But some of the popular ones I would say are the Trinity stamp ones. I'm really liking a lot, and I have to say Carrie Rhodes was the person who got me into the Trinity stamps ones. She, when I told her I'd never tried it before and that I quite frankly feel like all blending brushes are just about the same, she was like, well, you haven't tried these, and you're gonna want to try them because they're very different. Now, there's going to be a big difference between something like these four, which are bristles. So these are actual it's very dense, but it's, you know, individual bristles. Okay, so that's a very different style class of blending brush as compared to something like the Picket Fence Studios. These are sponge, and there aren't individual bristles, and so this is more of a sponge dauber style of blending tool. And so you might have to experiment a little bit to see what works with the type of inks that you like to blend with. This is another sponge style of blending tool. This one's from Imagine Crafts. I've used this one recently and I actually quite like it. It's really nice. This is pretty high quality also. and I like it a lot for it's domed. So I like anything that's domed because usually that helps you to avoid harsh lines if you're trying to blend a background. So similarly, these bristles, they are domed, as you can see, and that's compared to this, which is bristles, but you can see it's cut flat right across, even though it's circular, because it's got these bristles which come to the same height. When you go to ink blend, it's very possible that it can create some lines, some straight harsh lines where that edge is. So there's lots of different options on the market, and they will definitely vary in price. And so depending on how much you do of this style of crafting, you might want to invest more or less into it. I don't do it super often, so I don't really feel the need to get, let's say you decided this was your favorite blending tool. A lot of people will buy multiples of these and have one for every color or basic color family. And so that might mean that you have 5, 6, 7, or 8 different of these, so that you can just use this for all of your yellows every time you use yellow. You don't actually have to wash it in between use. But the thing that you need to also take into consideration is if you have a lot of different types of inks, like you have a dye-based ink and you have a pigment-based ink, you probably don't want to be mixing this in between the two. And so some people then further get a set of blending brushes, one for their dye-based inks and one for their pigment-based inks. So you can see it can quickly escalate, but if you're doing a lot of blending and you're reaching for these supplies all the time, it might be worth it to have that many so that you don't have to find yourself needing to wash it every time you switch inks. So for me, because I don't actually use this very often, Carrie was really nice, and she asked Tanisha, who's the owner of Trinity Stamps, to send me a few to try. And so I only have 3 of them, but I just wash them in between use. And even if the bristles are stained, it's not going to carry over and deposit that color the next time I go to use it. Even if the bristles look like they're this color, if I dip this into another color, it's going to be just fine. That yellow is not going to impart itself onto my panel. So, you can just do what I do. If you don't ink blend very often, you can just have a few, maybe 3, 4, 5, a small handful, and enough. Basically, I would say like 3 is a good number, and I'm really grateful that Tanisha sent me 3 because it's a really good number, because usually if I'm blending a background, I'm really only gonna blend between 3, maybe 4 colors. And so 3 is really good so that I can have one for each color blend that I'm creating for that particular project. And then when I'm done, I can just wash them. And then they're ready to go the next time I need to create a blended background and choose another set of 3 colors. So that works out fine for me. But whether it's like brushes that have a handle or daubers that are more like sponge daubers, and you can choose what works best for the line of inks that you have, and some of that just might be trial and error. So you might want to try like 1 or 2 in the various different form factors to see what works best for you, and then decide how many you need in that line. So just like the Trinity ones with the Picket Fence Studios, I mean, you can buy these as a set, and they come with the color handle. Clearly I didn't really stick to the color that was suggested, because that's more of like a tan color, I think. But you can get this in like a rainbow set, and then that way you have a full set but I think you can also pick them up in smaller bundles or individually if you just wanted to try one. And they have the Picket Fence Studio ones, they do have this in a mini version too as well. So you can get the large version like this, or you can get the mini version if you wanted a smaller sponge dauber. So lots of different options, but I definitely find this is a really nice, definite for if you do any stenciling, you need some kind of blending brush to deposit the ink through the stencil. So, so having something, whatever form factor you like best or size that you like best, I feel like this is definitely a craft room basic. And that just about, I think, rounds up, oh, the last craft room basic. And I know I didn't want to get too much into things like storage and organization, but I do think that having some kind of spray bottle is really important. I use this a lot. And in fact, I have a few that I would recommend. So the big Spellbinders one, it holds a larger volume of water, and I just put tap water in this. And this is what I use to clean my work surface. So if I'm stenciling, for example, or I'm doing an inky background right onto my glass mat, when I'm done, I'll just spray tap water over it to clean up the glass mat. And tap water is just fine because, you know, it's if it gets a little bit funky or whatever, that's fine. It's not going onto like a project. It's not going to impart that smell into a project. And generally speaking, because I also use this to sometimes just clean my stamps in between use, I go through this water pretty quickly. Now, I do also use this bottle, and it's an amber glass bottle because I've done a lot of like things with essential oils and, you know, creating my own little oil blends for, you know, different health kind of therapeutic benefits. And because some essential oils are light sensitive, putting them into an amber glass bottle is necessary so that you don't lose the properties that you want out of that essential oil. And often you don't want it to be a plastic container either. So that's why I have these bottles, but I've sort of co-opted some of those bottles and brought them into my craft room to craft with. And in this bottle specifically, I only fill this with distilled water, so that if I'm using this to maybe activate some pigment or media supplies or anything that's actually going to go onto a project, I will often use this because it's distilled water. It's got all of the bacteria, minerals, etc. filtered out. So it's not going to have like any funky smells over time. And then I also use this whenever I make things like these, like my custom little sprays. I always use distilled water, and often I'll just decant some out of this to put into, I'll get like a eyedropper or something, and I'll fill these little spray bottles. So these are little mini misters. I think they're like 0.25 of an ounce. And whenever I'm mixing up my own custom sprays, I do like to put them in small bottles like this, small sprays like this, because that's all I really need. And I don't typically like to mix up a lot. These things, you know, they last you a long time. Because this is a lot. This will be good for several projects and backgrounds and whatnot. So, so I like this amount for my custom sprays. And you can see it, like I've mixed these up. Some of them have some mica in them, and I have a lot of these little ones. They're pretty inexpensive. So I do like to use this size spray. I do also use these sprays as well. So this is probably more the size that you would find in like a mica spray, for example, or I think like Lindy's Gang. If you ever get their sprays, it comes with an empty bottle and you can dissolve the powder in there. I have in here Goo Gone, to be honest, for cleaning the glue residue off of things like my scissors, off of my glass mat. So it's just really nice to spray down. Like every once in a while, I'll kind of feel if there's like a lot of little glue residue on my glass mat. You can't see it, but I can feel it. And so every once in a while, if that starts to accumulate too much, I just spray my glass mat with some Goo Gone and I wipe that down, and then I spray it down with just some tap water to sort of rinse off the chemicals. But this is good for if you use your scissors to cut through anything that has sort of like dry adhesive on it. It's good for cleaning all of that gunk off of the blades of your scissors as well. And so I find it useful to keep that in a little spray bottle. And then this one I keep filled with alcohol, because sometimes as a cleaning solution, alcohol is better than just plain water. And so I just put my isopropyl alcohol into this, which again is a little mini mister. And so I'll use this for cleaning also. So these two are more for like cleaning up, or these three I would say are more for cleaning up. And the only reason to have them in different size spray bottles is I don't ever really need this volume of Goo Gone. So it's nice to have these small little amounts, and that way I can buy a large bottle of Goo Gone but not feel. I actually have a larger bottle than even this. This is like a mini bottle, but this has a pretty wide opening, and so I just decant this into the small spray bottle. And if I'm cleaning scissors, I just spray this into, say, like a blue shop towel like this, and then wipe down my scissors. If I'm trying to clean my glass board, I just spray directly onto my glass board and clean it that way. So so those are some of the sprays that I use, which I know they're not really for making anything, but I still find them to be essentials because they help clean up the aftermath of your supplies, to help clean and keep those in good shape, so that whenever you're using them, they're in good condition. And particularly the glue residue on your scissors, when that gets really gunky, it could actually affect how well those cut. So cleaning them every once in a while is important. So I think that wraps up all of the miscellaneous products that I find myself using. So that's a pretty long list, isn't it? And if you're looking at that total at the end, oh, it's a lot. But to be honest, you don't really need to spend that much to get started in your paper crafting journey if you are just starting out. Like I mentioned at the outset, if you are crafting on a budget, do check out my budget-friendly version of this video, where for all of the same functionality that you can get out of the set of products that I'm recommending in this video, you can find more budget-friendly but still quality tools and equipment that won't break the bank. So check that video out as well, and maybe the two in combination will help you to narrow in on a set of products that are right for you and the type of crafting that you like to do, as well as that will be friendly to your wallet and will be more budget friendly. So a lot of the things that I'm recommending in this video are the things that I actually use pretty much every time I sit down to craft. It doesn't mean that you need all of those things. And as well, the type of crafter I am, I like to die cut, and so you'll probably see a healthy chunk of my list and that budget that I have is on die cutting machines. And I did keep two of them in the list because I do find I use both of them often enough that I would still find both of my die cutting machines to be essentials in my craft room. So if you're not a big die cutter, that's a big area of your budget that you could save and maybe invest in other areas. And so it really just depends on the type of crafting that you enjoy doing, whether my recommendations make sense for you or not. And you're the only one who will know that. So if you want a closer look at any of the products that I'm recommending, I'll leave links to everything that I can find in the description box below so that you can click over and check out those products for yourself. Likely they will be affiliate links. So if you do end up making a purchase after you've clicked one of my affiliate links, I do get a small commission, but that is not at any additional cost to you. So I hope whoever's links you're clicking to make a purchase, that you do use a creator's affiliate link. It just helps that creator to offset some of their costs in creating review videos like I often do, paper crafting tutorial videos. And so it's really at no extra cost to you, but it makes a huge difference to us. So thank you so much if you've used my links before in the past or you use any of my links in the future. I really, really appreciate it. If you found this video helpful, something free that you can do for me is to hit the like button, maybe share it with your other crafty friends, and maybe even subscribe to my channel so that you can see new videos as I post them. Thanks again, and until next time, happy crafting and have a fabulous day. Bye!